Hey, it's Brian and Chris here from Resolve Technology. And today I just want to basically summarize an article that I came across in this Chief Security Officer online website. I think they put out a magazine. But anyway, the name of the person eludes me, but this is basically some information that this writer came up with. I'll put a link to the article in the video so we can give an attribution to that writer because he researched the data and these numbers are based on his findings. But I thought it was just a nice overview of what's going on with the cost of data breaches. In the US, average breach cost was 9.36 million. I believe that was in 2023. And so basically, of course, the US, we lead the world in breaches. The rest of the world is about a $500,000 per breach on average. Right. So, of course, there's some countries that pay a lot less than others. And the bigger the country, the UK, for example, they may be number 2 on the list. They're up there. So breaches by industry, healthcare would be number 1 at 9.77 million per breach. Least expensive breaches were, and we see this, public sector, retail, education, and hospitality. And the reason is because they don't have as much money to pay things like ransoms and extortion fees, because the primary goal these days is for hackers to extract information from your company. So they want IP information, intellectual property, personal identifying information or PA information about your clients or patients. So that's the end goal because they know there's money in it. So there's less of that public sector and things like that. But surprisingly, education was number 2. I don't know where manufacturing and professional service industries fall into this mix because he didn't give the breakdown, but these are just numbers that this writer came up with. And then he talks about how they got in. Number 1, compromised credentials. So just one of the things you can do there is obviously have strong passwords, but also turn on MFA, right? Turn on multi-factor authentication, have a second factor. So that way, if the password isn't strong enough and they get through on the password, they still can't get through without somebody accepting, putting in a code for the second factor, whatever you're logging into, web portals, local applications, if you can. Like we have it on some clients for workstations, right? Where they have to actually not only put in the Windows password, but they have to put in a second factor. Number 2 way to get in is phishing emails. And that's the one that people think about the most because that email's in their face all the time. Phishing emails is still an easy way to get into systems. So what you can do there is maybe add some additional filtering to your email systems, whether it's Microsoft 365, Google. You put these services in front of your infrastructure so that you can filter out these phishing emails. Obviously, on top of that, you want to have security awareness training for your employees. Show them how to identify before they start clicking a bunch of links. The third way is cloud misconfiguration. Here's the thing, a lot of stuff is being put in the cloud, but I just heard this the other day where some other person took over for another a new person that was leaving, and they were able to get in through remote desktop protocol, right? They had ports open so they could easily get into there. If you're not careful with the cloud stuff, it's just as easy or easier to get into those because there's so many different settings in these Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. All these cloud, I don't think people are trained well enough on security in a lot of these cloud setups like they were in the old days with the on-premise equipment. And they just think it's easy to forget when it's up in the cloud that they also have these security holes. So you got to make sure your IT people are trained up on that. Configuration, I don't know where this fell in the list. It may be on the next slide, but IT misconfigurations are a problem. That's an example of an IT misconfiguration where they have an open port. So some of the recommendations he had, stick to the basics, right? You don't have to spend a lot of money on this stuff. Multi-factor authentication, still use strong passwords, even if you have multi-factor. Identify the assets in your business, the assets and what's the most critical servers, the most critical devices on your network. So you have a plan if something happens to those devices and you have to shut them down and you have to bring on other devices to get your business back up and running. But identifying assets, you need to know everything that's on the network, right? There's ways your IT people can scan for these assets. There's ways that you can automate the scans so that if somebody plugs in a device that isn't supposed to be on the network, you can see it. There's ways to segment off the network if that does happen. So identifying assets is very important. And he just mentions AI is not the solution. Not yet. Eventually, I think AI will help a lot with security. But right now, he mainly talks about sticking to the basics, which we tend to agree with. You can eliminate or reduce a lot of risk just sticking to the basics. Okay, that's all he talked about in the article. And Chris, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so with the cloud misconfiguration, I did find something on IBM that breach data stored in public clouds incurred the highest average breach cost of 5 million. So public cloud, we're talking AWS or Google Cloud, probably even DigitalOcean, Linode, whatever they're called now. So ways around that is you can secure your servers, but that's mostly an IT thing. You put it behind, if it doesn't need to be public facing, hide it behind the VPN, leverage something like a reverse proxy. There's many different layers to all this. How you authenticate if it's a Linux server, say you're hosting a web server, you got a website, you're not using Word, you're doing it the old school way. There's ways where you disable password authentication and you use some other means of authentication to remote into that server and also hide it behind. Only expose what ports you need to expose. Maybe you're just in that instance there, web traffic's the only thing coming to and from it. So likely 80.443, things like that.
Yeah, so that's some good recommendations for the IT side of the house as far as to avoid the misconfigurations. Those are some good ideas there. All right, we'll end it on that. Like I said, I'll put the link in down below so you can look at the article. Again, that is where these are basic ideas, but I thought it was a well-written article to give you the basics. All right, we'll see you, Chris.